Good morning, everyone. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties. Thank you for joining us for our ongoing Gubernatorial Candidates Forum series. I'm Ron Halber, Executive Director of the JCRC of Greater Washington, and I'm thrilled today to introduce you to Gubernatorial Candidate Comptroller Peter Franchot. Before we begin, you should know that this program is being recorded. Also, if you want to access closed captioning, please click on the live transcript button on your screen. And finally, after we hear from our candidate, I'll moderate a Q&A session. And this is really your opportunity to speak to the candidate directly. Please do not unmute yourself until I ask you to, and please make your questions succinct so we can get to as many as possible. And if you're not comfortable, for whatever reason, engaging directly, just please send me your question. I'll be happy to ask it for you. And I will not note the person who's asking the question if you indicate that. As a 501c3 nonprofit, the JCRC does not support or oppose candidates for public office, but these meetings are critical to the JCRC fulfilling its critical mission to educate the Jewish community and promote civic participation. The JCRC is the public affairs and community relations arm of the Greater Washington Jewish community, and we represent more than 100 organizations, synagogues, and schools, as well as the Jewish Federation. Core to our being is advocating for the needs and values of the Jewish community and the well-being of everyone in the region, especially the most vulnerable. We're focused, especially today, on supporting the state of Israel, combating anti-Semitism, and we're deeply committed to cultivating a society based on freedom, equity, justice, and pluralism. Now let me introduce our guest. As many of you know, Peter Franchot serves as Maryland's comptroller. He was elected in 2006 and has been reelected 3 times. Peter is a U.S. Army veteran, previously had a distinguished career in the Maryland House of Delegates. He was a former staff director for Congressman and now U.S. Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts. Franchot has, under Peter's leadership, Peter, I'm sorry, we've been friends for a while. It's going to end up me calling you Peter, as long as that's okay with you. As long as that's okay with you, Comptroller Franchot. Peter's office has been ranked #1 in the nation for efficiency in terms of distributing more than 3 million tax refunds worth roughly $3 billion per year with an average turnaround of 2.5 days. His office recently showcased its efficiency by distributing 98% of the COVID Relief Act stimulus funds, which is more than 415,000 payments to Maryland residents, totaling $171 million within just 1 week of the bill's passage. Mr. Franchot lives in Tacoma Park with his wife of 40 years. They have 2 children and 3 adorable grandchildren. And I just want, and so Peter, it's a pleasure to have you. What I try to do whenever we have one of these candidates is to give you a little anecdote about the candidate. So Peter and I had the pleasure of having dinner together in Jerusalem, together about, it's got to be about 12 years ago, Peter, more. And I was sitting in between Governor O'Malley and Governor and Comptroller Franchot, and it was a public, everywhere publicly knew that occasionally the 2 gentlemen would have a disagreement. And I asked both of them if it was safe for me to sit here, and they said, yeah. And both basically said, yeah, it's a good idea for you to sit here. It was in a very smiling, in a very happy way. Another anecdote, as many of you may know, that a couple of years ago, the Tacoma Park government made, as far as I'm concerned, a ridiculous decision to show a water narrated by Roger Waters, which was a total hit job on Israel. And as far as I'm concerned, it was not just anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist, but it was a terrible, terrible movie. And JCRC asked 8 of the 9 council members to condemn the movie. On the night of the movie, the controller showed up without even me asking him, and he lives in Tacoma Park, so he has to live and deal with these folks, and stood up and publicly spoke to a couple of news stations condemning the movie, saying this movie had no right to be shown at taxpayers' expense. So if you want to know, that shows you a little bit. Peter and I have been friends for 2 decades. It shows you a little bit more. That tells you about the character of the man, and it also tells you something which is interesting: is judge people by what they do, not what they say. And when someone does something without being asked, it gives you a wonderful insight into who the person is. So on that note, Peter, if you would please take about 5-10 minutes and explain why you're running for governor, and then we will answer and we will open up the floor for questions. It's all yours.
Ron, thank you very much. And my apologies again for the technical problems. And Ron, thank you for your leadership and advocacy for JCRC, but mainly just on behalf of the Jewish community, but frankly, the entire state. And Ron, you know that your leadership makes a difference. So I'm delighted to be with you. I'm looking forward to having some questions. If people dropped off in frustration, I would understand. Ron gave me that very nice introduction. And I'll just mention that, yes, I've been married now for 41 years.
Oh,
And,
got to update your bio.
lived in Tacoma Park that whole time. And all my professional accomplishments aside, my thing I'm proudest most of is my marriage and my kids and my grandkids. Like all of you, these young kids are all messages to the future from us. And I'm just blessed that I've got this, tremendous strength of a family around me. And I don't mean to emphasize it a lot, but today I had to get up at 6 o'clock because my wife nudged me and said, "Did you take the garbage out last night?" That's my job, taking the garbage out once a week. So she said, "Mr. Comptroller, please get up and go take the trash out." My second job that I do get a lot of pleasure out of is doing the dishes. That's my job at home. I also enjoy the job that I have of bringing her a hot cup of coffee in bed first thing in the morning. Those are things that, make me much more like anybody on the call today, just a normal person. And I'm going to give everyone my personal cell phone so that if you need something offline or you just want to, connect with a statewide official, you can. My cell phone is 301 area code 332-1961. And my staff can put it up in the chat room there so somebody can get it. Just very quickly, everybody in the state is very agitated and upset with the nightmare going on in Ukraine. That is just the top subject right now with every citizen that I interact with. The news is incredibly grim. It is just a complete catastrophe that's going on over there, none of which is our response, our fault, things that we or the rest of the world have done. So amidst all the grim news, I'd like to give you two pieces of really good news. 2 weeks ago today, we had a meeting of the Board of Revenue Estimates. That's the governor's budget secretary and the treasurer and myself. I'm chairman of that committee. And I announced at it 2 weeks ago today that the state has a one-time only unbelievable windfall of $7.5 billion in surplus tax revenues that were not calculated. So this one-time post-pandemic report is enormously good news for our state because it gives us the flexibility and the economic lane, I guess, towards addressing some challenges that we need to in our state. In the meeting, at the end of it, I just commented in passing, I think it would be really good, given the Ukraine situation, if we could stop some of the inflation that we see in gas prices. Why don't we have a gas tax holiday for 90 days? The meeting closed. An hour later, Governor Hogan, to his credit, said, "I think that's a great idea to have a gas tax holiday." And 2 hours after that, the legislative leaders said, "We think that's a good idea." And 1 week later, just last week, Thursday, actually it was Friday, I'm sorry, the governor signed into legislation a 30-day, not a 90-day, but a 30-day gas tax holiday. That was the quickest I have ever in my elected officials' life seen the legislature and the governor and comptroller's office, everybody working together to do something. All the skeptics said, "Gee, there are 2,300 gas stations in Maryland. They're not going to pass on the gas tax that they don't have to pay. That's 36.1 cents per gallon. They're just going to pocket it." I said, "No, they aren't. We regulate these folks. They are terrific, hardworking Marylanders. They're patriotic, just like everybody else. They're going to do the right thing." And I'm happy to report that when the governor signed it 6 days ago, Friday at 2 p.m., immediately, almost all 2,300 gas stations immediately dropped their price from $4.10 down to $3.78, from $4 to down to $3. And they're going to keep doing that. And I hold that up to you just as an example of government being able to do what it should be doing, which is working cooperatively to help people. And this gas tax holiday, I take my wife is rolling her eyes now. I take some credit for introducing the idea and seeing it happen. We're the first state in the country to do this. And I urge everybody to go and fill up your tanks in your cars because
Peter, how much is that how much of the surplus will be used up by that 33-cent relief?
Great question, Ron. When I proposed the 3-month thing, we had already vetted it out because we have all these economic experts. It would have cost the state $250 million. They had to put it, we have to put that into the Transportation Trust Fund because we have obligations. The 30-day one, which is law, which I believe will be extended to 90 days. I can't guarantee that, but I think it's wildly popular. That's going to cost the state $100 million.
So peanuts in the surplus, right?
Yeah, it's a very small amount. It's completely affordable. And the main thing is it makes people happy. And it helps the state economy because already we see license plates from Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, DC coming to get tax-free gas in Maryland. And guess what? They do other shopping. So it's all good for small businesses. Long-winded way of saying I try to pride myself on results, not just rhetoric. And the surplus is what my mother used to say, bless her soul. She used to say, Petey, she called me. The proof is in the pudding. That was her phrase, because I would talk politics all the time. She always wanted to know, well, what have you actually done other than have opinions? And so we have the surplus. We have the tax-free gas holiday going on. I'm chair of the board of trustees of the pension system. That's a $70 billion fund for our teachers and law enforcement and county public employees. That is well on its way to being fully funded. And historically, it has not been fully funded and it's been a problem for the state financially. Our AAA bond rating is absolutely locked in. For 3 years in a row, I'm the only comptroller in the country, the only state in the country to postpone the state tax date from April 15th to July 15th. That provided about $1.5 billion in no interest, no penalty loan from the state of Maryland to small businesses primarily, who that's how they report their income. Well, 600,000 Maryland families have taken advantage of that each year. And it was a little bit of a risk because people said, once again, the skeptics, oh, well, people then won't pay their taxes. No, people do pay their taxes, but we give them a little bit of a break. And we're doing that again for the 3rd straight year. So let me just stop there and say, I'm honored and humbled to be a statewide official. I've been comptroller for 15 years. I was in the legislature for 20 years representing Tacoma Park, just kiddingly called the People's Republic of Tacoma Park. It's a very liberal area on the Appropriations Committee. And I offer myself up to people and say, look, you've trusted me with your money for many years, and you can trust me as governor with your money. And the first thing I will do, the first foreign trade trip that I make is going to be Israel because of my, whether I'm in politics or not, my strong support for the nation over there, which is just surrounded. Ron mentioned that we went over with the Weinberg thing. I think it was 14 years ago, frankly, now that I think about it. But Netanyahu was out of power, and I remember that dinner with O'Malley distinctly. But they're surrounded by hostile neighbors, and so that's me. When I see someone that's a little bit of an underdog, picked on, bullied, victim of either verbal hate or physical hate, I'm right there. And I will always have Israel's back, period. And maybe some of the folks on this call could go with us because Ron, you're going to be in the front seat when we go.
Oh, as long as I'm not on the wing, I'm happy.
Yeah, we will. But anyway, a long-winded way of saying, I've been in politics many, many years. I'm a Democrat. I'm proud to be a Democrat. I'm a fiscal moderate. I'm a social, compassionate individual. I work across party lines because I come out of the public interest movement and the Army and that kind of environment, not the Democratic clubs. So I happen to think that I am an independent Democrat. I'm not somebody who takes orders and does things because people above me tell me to. That's not me. I'm someone who tries to do things the right way for the entire state. And I think that's the strength that I have all across Maryland. And I'm running against fabulous people, many of whom you've talked to already. They're terrific, but nobody has the kind of perspective and experience with the budget that I have had, or frankly, with many issues that you have to confront as comptroller. Let me stop there and just apologize again for the technical delay, and I'm happy to take whatever questions you have.
So Peter, let me take advantage of, first of all, thank you very much. As moderator, let me just get this going, and then we will give time for people to start putting questions in the chat or in the chat screen, and then I'll ask them. So my first question to you is, okay, so Peter, you win the nomination, you go on to become governor. Okay, you decide you really like this job. I'm going to do it for another 4 years, and you decide to run for 8. When you're walking out of Annapolis at the end of having served 2 4-year terms as governor, what are the 3 things you want to be able to tell yourself that you accomplished at the end of the day and look back on, be most proud of? What are the 3 things that you want to get done, that you want to be able to say, to tell your grandchildren or tell any future generation or have history record that you accomplished?
Well, number one, I want to double the GDP of the state in 8 years. That's a very aggressive plan. Only Washington State has ever been able to do that. But I believe Maryland is poised in the post-Ukraine global economy, which I believe will treat Russia somewhat like North Korea. I have no quarrel with the Russian people, but Putin is something different. And so I think that he has managed to somehow miraculously unite all of the democratic countries, all of the rational countries in a bloc that are going to create a post-Ukraine economy without Russia. And I want Maryland to be right at the center of that. And it is poised because of our geographic situation and the Port of Baltimore and the airport at BWI and the whole Montgomery crescent of intersection of technology and government. Maryland is poised to be the international center for global logistics and once again, that intersection between government and technology, which is all about, that's what Montgomery and other parts of the Washington suburbs are all about. So doubling the state's GDP from 444 billion to 888 billion, very ambitious. I think it's doable. Happy to talk about that. Number 2, I want people to feel connected. I don't want them to feel as if when they speak about issues that they care about, that either nobody listens to them or nobody even hears them. They don't have a voice. So I'm going to be a governor that gives my personal cell phone out to people who are civic leaders. I'm going to be connected to the public. And I don't distinguish between Republicans and Democrats. Frankly, with tax returns, there's no such thing as a Republican tax return or a Democratic tax return. But I'm also going to put that bipartisan, nonpartisan brand on the entire state. And I think with proper adult, mature, rational leadership, we can accomplish that in Maryland. And then finally, I'm going to show the citizens of the state that just like the comptroller's office runs like a Swiss clock, the rest of the state government can. And just to test myself, the first 3 months as governor, I'm going to fix every pothole on every state road. I'm going to pick up all the trash along state roads, which I don't know whether anyone's noticed it, but it's ubiquitous now. And I'm going to require every state agency to do what my agency does, which is answer the 800,000 phone calls we get a year. I'm going to ask every state agency to do what we do, which is have a live, friendly, professional employee of the office on the phone within 60 seconds to help whatever frustrated resident we have navigate the system. And that, to me, I define not as customer service so much. It's just basic competency in government. And then once you establish that in the first 3 months, I think then I'm able to do some transformative things in issues that everybody is concerned about. But the key thing for me is I want to be seen as a governor who is accessible and honest, doesn't disgrace anybody, doesn't, you know, act in ways that people just find incomprehensible. I want to be someone that everybody can relate to and everybody can recognize is trying to do the right thing. We're not always going to make the right decision, but we can always be ready to make adjustments. And I guess I'd like to, you know, the third most important thing for me is to create a state that is a go-to state for young people all around the country. And because we're doing something special. And I'll just conclude by saying one of my models is going to be the way in which your organization and other organizations like yours take care of your communities. You don't just, it's not just religious community. It is built around religion. It is built around people helping people. And so you have resources for your community members who are in, you know, legal trouble or health trouble or housing trouble or down and out. I mean, that's the kind of approach I want to have the entire state take to all of our 6 million plus constituents. And I think it's doable. I forget the name in the Jewish religion. It's something like SHALEK or something. I forget what the actual term is, but it's this wraparound approach to our folks who are not as blessed as we are to be financially independent and have housing. A lot of people work their whole lives and have nothing. And I'm not talking about a small number of people. I'll just finish with this because I keep advocating this and hopefully they'll start listening to it, like the gas tax holiday that went through the legislature so fast. In the remaining time in the legislature, they should take $1 billion of that $7.5 billion surplus immediately and send it in $2,000 survival checks, I call them, to 500,000 Maryland families that I have in my database because they're all taxpayers. And they have nothing. They don't own a home. They don't have any money in their bank account. They don't have any money for food. They don't have any money for medicine. They've been disproportionately affected by COVID. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And they need a $2,000 check immediately. I then tell my conservative friends, this is good, because that will also boost the state's economy because it's a multiplier effect. So that's kind of I don't mean to wander around. I'm not somebody that is like, you know, going to give you a grocery list of great things that I'm going to accomplish. I'd much rather have you look at what I've done, like the gas tax holiday, like the surplus, like not having disgraced anybody in my 35 years as an elected official. So thank you. Good question, but I'll try to be briefer on the next response.
No problem. No problem. No problem. Thank you for your. Is my audio having a problem?
No, I can hear you.
I don't know why. Is that okay now? Okay. We have a question from Susan. What programs of Governor Hogan's would you expand and which would you deviate from? And then a more particular, why does Maryland use Business Express for payments when they are completely unresponsive to issues on their site? So what would you keep and change from Governor Hogan, and why do we use Business Express for payments when the questioner says it's an unreliable system?
Well, on Business Express, that's a new question for me. So I'll defer and get back. If you post your contact info, I'll give the chat group and others a responsible answer. I have always found Governor Hogan to be what I call a rational, functioning adult. He's a kind of leader on the Republican side or on the Democratic side that I frankly find to be what we should be doing at the national level. I don't know whether anybody saw the confirmation hearings yesterday, but that was an absolute disgrace and a stain on the US Senate. To see that performance by people that apparently want to demonize everything in front of them. And it was scary to me. Well, Hogan, he's a Republican, I'm a Democrat. When we both were first, I had been running for re-election for 8 years, so I've been in office. But when he was elected, and somewhat of a surprise, remember he defeated Anthony Brown, my good friend from the legislature. But he came into office, and one of the first things he did was to come to my office, which I'd never really ever had any powerful person, so to speak, come personally to my office before he was sworn in. And he said, "What can I do for you?" I said, "Well, the biggest problem for me is that people try to keep me under their thumb by messing with the agency in the budget. And they keep trying to send me messages by cutting my budget and that kind of stuff. And they also limit my ability to hire and fire in my own agency. I'm an independently elected statewide officer. I need autonomy." He looked at me and he said, "Fine, no problem. You have it. You have it. You don't have to come. As long as you stay on budget, you can't go over your budget." And I said, "That's great. We're not talking about it. We're talking about just respecting and autonomy." I then said, "By the way, you campaigned against the Purple Line, which is a very important mass transit connection of WMATA's kind of spokes going out. The Purple Line is something that you campaigned against in your campaign. You said it was a waste of money. I would like you to take another look at it, please, because it's very important to particularly our low wage earners." And guess what? To his credit, he did. He took another look at it and he changed his mind. And the Purple Line has had some problems. We can talk about that, but it's well on its way to being finished. It will be somewhat over budget and not on time, but that's okay because it's a very important project. I offer that just to say my relationship with Governor Hogan is based on issues. And some things I don't agree with him on. I particularly don't agree with some of the things he says. I sat with him yesterday and had a conversation where obviously he's running for president, and God bless him. I appreciate the fact that he's been a somewhat independent voice against Trump, who I think I'm sorry if I offend anybody, but don't think that he's terrific. And I particularly, it's easy for me as a Democrat to criticize Trump. It's not easy for Hogan. And fundamentally, he's done a good job as far as COVID. Not a perfect job because we're all inventing it as we go along. So generally, I find him to be someone you can have a discussion with and, interact with. It's like anybody who's in business on the call. I mean, this is like, it's important. So do I have differences with him? Yes. The legislature at one point, because they're very democratic leadership in the legislature, got very upset. So they did a big audit of the Board of Public Works. This is me, the governor, and the treasurer. We meet every 2 weeks. We spend $450 million in contracts, 50 to 60 contracts. We approve them. Anything over $200,000 that the state enters into has to be voted on by the Board of Public Works. It is a unique panel. No other state has one like it. The governor's independently elected. I'm an independently elected. The treasurer is elected by the legislature. So everybody's represented. And, it's important to have a civil kind of mature approach because it's close quarters and it happens every 2 weeks. And on average, we spend $440 million. So the legislature said, well, we think, because you say nice things about Governor Hogan and you seem to be working with him, we think that's wrong. And we're going to do an audit of how many times you've disagreed with Governor Hogan. Well, they did the audit, but they never released it because their representative, my dear friend, Nancy Cobb, the recently retired treasurer, I disagreed with Hogan over the 8-year, 4-year period, maybe it was a 1-year period they're looking at. I disagreed with Hogan far more than she did. The legislature's representative, longtime delegate, I served with Nancy Cobb, wonderful person, I'm not suggesting anything, but they had to bury the audit because what they imagined from our cordial relationship was not the truth. That somehow, I and Hogan were doing all sorts of things on policies. No, I think it was 2 times more. I objected and disagreed with Governor Hogan at the Board of Public Works than Treasurer Cobb. So I can get a list of those things, I guess, to you. Maybe I can find the audit and send it to you because I took it as a good housekeeping seal of approval. Basically, I'm doing what people expect me to do, the right thing. And so there you go. I'm a little frustrated with politics these days. You may hear that in my voice, but I do believe I'll be the next governor, and I think I'm going to be able to change that political culture, which right now is very toxic, even in Annapolis.
So, Peter, I want to take the next. Never had this problem with my audio. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, I'm going to take the next 25 minutes that we have because we expanded the call by 15 minutes. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions to bang out and see if we can get to these because people are asking. Number 1 from Jim, if elected, what is your biggest challenge on your plate and how will you address it?
Well, we have a number of big challenges. Climate change is one, but I would urge everybody to go to Franchot.com and read our 14 pledges. We're the only candidate that did anything in detail and actually published the books. We have 2 of them. One is our 14 pledges. They talk about all the major issues, but most importantly, they connect them all together. So it's a package of progress that the state needs to make. Immediately after filling the potholes, picking up the trash, answering the telephone within 60 minutes, then we're going to launch into 100,000 new jobs in the next 100 weeks. Attracting 100,000 young millennials from around the country to come to Maryland and also retain the ones who are here by saying, if you live after graduation from community college or regular college, if you live and work and pay taxes in Maryland for 5 years, the state will forgive your student loan. Healthcare, always a problem. It continues to be inaccessible and unaffordable for many, many people. So we're going to triple the number of FQHCs, they're called, federally qualified healthcare clinics. Make sure people in West Baltimore and East Baltimore City are no more than a 15-minute walk from a world-class clinic. And in rural areas of the state, make sure that it's no farther than 15-minute drive. K through 12 education, frankly. I mean, I've been a huge education advocate for years, but the system's not working well. The kids are not of high morale. The teachers are exhausted and tired with COVID and weighed down by these standardized tests that they have to teach to. So we're going to change that in an affordable, cooperative, collaborative way with the local education officials. And we're going to have a 90% reduction in standardized tests. We're going to have class sizes limited because you can't teach 30 or 40 kids in a single classroom. And we're going to create a flex day, encourage people, locals, to have a day or an afternoon every Wednesday where the teachers get to plan next week's lessons and the kids get to interact with folks from JCRC, for example, who come into school and help educate them about what your organization does and what some of the issues are. Small businesses come in, but somehow ignite the imagination of kids much more than it is currently. I'm not suggesting major changes. I'm talking about a different curriculum and an approach to curriculum. And then on housing, we're going to create 250 or 300,000 new homeowners. I mentioned these hardworking, lower wage workers in our state, 500,000 of them, who work and work and work and work. And at the end of the day, they have nothing. They have no wealth. They don't own a home. So we're going to allow them to buy homes if they have some income, and we're going to guarantee the loan so that they don't have high risk loans with 20% down payments. They have low risk loans with 2% down payment. And they have an interest rate, which is not a high risk interest rate, but a low risk interest rate, because the state, without putting money in, is simply going to say, look, for these individuals that were vetted, we're going to allow them to purchase a home. So anyway, we have transformative ideas about many, many sectors, but I would urge everybody to look at Franchot.com. We're the only campaign that's put out detailed information. I have young people all the time come to me and say, you know, everybody else is saying they're for climate, they're for fighting climate change, they're for this, they're for that, but there's nothing there. There's no publication. Well, you've got it with me because, you know, it's all down in writing. Happy to send everybody a copy, but it's also there on the internet at Franchot.com, and you'll see that everything is densely thought through and that everything is interconnected, which is the way I view governing. I don't think I'm going to be hanging my hat on just one issue.
Peter, we have a question here. Since we have such a high surplus, this is from Marcia, is there a possibility Maryland could stop taxing pension income in the future?
No, probably.
Okay.
Because it's just not fiscally responsible. This surplus is not due to any increase in our economy. It's simply due to the federal relief that came in. And frankly, a third of it is attributable to what I mentioned when I moved the tax date, because it allows these small businesses to get out of the winter season in April, the end of the winter season, and get into the summer season. So it's one time only, it's a windfall. In my humble opinion, it should not be injected into the operating budget, and it should not be the basis for permanent tax cuts, because those are ongoing demands on future budgets, and we're going to run into a real problem if we commit the state and we don't have we have a downturn, for example, in the economy.
Right. Wendy asks a question. I don't know if this I'm interested in your answer.
I just finished on this for a minute, and so.
Yeah,
yeah, the $7.5 billion, in my humble expression, I think we should put $3 billion of it into the rainy day fund. That's the state's piggy bank for downturns. The governor, I think, is kind of interested in that. I think we should take $2 billion of that and put it right into one-time only infrastructure projects, like what's going on in 270 and the American Legion Bridge. And then we should take $1 billion and put it in emergency relief checks to these 500,000 Maryland families. I can deliver it to them within 24 hours, fraud free, because I have all their information in my database. And then we should take the remaining $1 billion and put $500 million into childcare, because the sector has been decimated by COVID and it's not properly regulated or constructed. Mostly it's small for-profit businesses run by women or minorities. And it's important that we recreate it, because people can't get back to work if they don't have an affordable place to send their kids. And then $500 million we should give in a one-time only small grants to people that you and other organizations identify who have not benefited from the federal relief or the state relief, but are great little businesses. And every time they close is a tragedy. And we've lost 40,000 of them, Ron, in the last 2 years, because we couldn't figure out how to get the relief to the right people. So I think we need to take the $7.5 billion and not put it into, as inviting as it is, not put it into ongoing tax cuts, because we just don't know where the economy is going to be in a year or 2 years.
Is there anything that, I'm summarizing some of these questions, is there anything that as governor that we can do to make Maryland less dependent on foreign oil?
Yes, day one, I will publish a number of executive orders, one of which is that Maryland will produce solar and wind electricity more than it, and right now we import electricity from the regional grid. I'm going to say by the end of my first term that we have more solar, more wind, so that we have more of our economy, for example, our state buildings and our state fleet are going to be converted to electricity, and we're going to ultimately export electricity made by solar and wind. That's point number one. Point number two, executive order number 2 will be to make the entire fleet of the state electric, so because that's part of it. And then thirdly, we're going to deal with this carbon issue by saying that I don't want to put a year on it because this is a more difficult issue, but the renewable powered electricity, I'm also including nuclear in it because we have the Calvert Cliffs plant. I'm very opposed to nuclear power, but we have to live with what we have. We can't be unrealistic. That's relatively carbon-free electricity. It's just that I don't like the nuclear waste, but that's okay. We got to deal with reality here. So the issue of carbon, which is so important to the climate issue, I'm suggesting that we have as a goal to be the first state in the country that is net zero carbon emissions. And that's different from the renewable energy, but it requires a lot of renewable energy. And also it requires private sector to develop some of these more sophisticated carbon technology infrastructure that allows us to actually go back and suck some of the carbon out of the atmosphere. And so, yeah, I'm all for making Maryland #1 in the country as when I mentioned a go-to state. This is a go-to state that is, from day one, the first executive orders I put out are going to be on these goals. My ambition is to link up with the private sector, which is the only sector that has the capital and the scale to do what we need to do. And the private sector is already moving in the right direction on this. Big car companies have said by 2030, they're not going to be making gas-powered cars anymore. They're all going to be electric. The coal industry in Western Maryland, I sat down with them, thought they were going to rake me over the coals for being an environmentalist. They didn't. They said, we're way ahead of you. We're not investing in coal anymore. We're investing in solar and wind. And so the private sector has the capital and the management, and the state has simply got to say, we're going to partner with you and give you some stability as far as the goals. And I think then you'll see Maryland rapidly become known around the country as a state that's really got something unique going as far as climate and as far as the environment. But thank you. There are lots of other components, but next question.
This is a really interesting question. Susan says, Maryland is a very high tax state. When my daughter attended the United States Air Force Academy as a cadet, she was taxed, whereas her peers were not. The first thing she and many newly minted lieutenants do is change their residency to a different lower tax or no tax state where they're stationed. How can we retain these now former constituents as residents of Maryland? I find that and also how can we help our military families? That's a very interesting question.
Yeah, no, I'm congrats to her daughter and happy to send one of my challenge coins. I've given out about 10,000 of them because Louis Goldstein used to hand out gold coins that were plastic, by the way. I hand out real medallions because I was in the Army and we had these challenge coin traditions. So I give them to law enforcement and members of the various branches. But on taxes, day one of being governor, I'm going to order a top to bottom review of all state taxes because I'm told that the business community sees us as a high tax state. I don't particularly agree with that, but I think there are some reallocation and reorganization of state taxes that could be helpful to the state. I'm also going to require a top to bottom review of all local regulation, particularly in my home county of Montgomery County, which I love, fabulous place. But frankly, we have a bit of a problem with permits and regulations that are managed by folks that do not have the right concept of being a constructive junior partner to the private sector. They lord it over. So we have I would like to not just pick on Montgomery, but I think all of the counties need to rein in their regulatory folks and make sure that people understand this is a partnership. This is not some top-down control operation where the public sector tells the private sector no all the time. And so I think those two reviews announced on the first day will give us some interesting information as to how to proceed. And I'm just glad that the person you mentioned, I take it, didn't have any tuition, no student debt, since I assume the military academies are for free. But I would challenge the idea that Maryland's a high tax state and therefore not welcome to people. It is a wonderful state. We just don't hide our taxes like other states do at the wholesale level.
Right.
And number two, you know, it's you know, I just try to keep people in the zone of reality. We have a great state because we spend money on things like education and environment and employment, et cetera. Some of that is not particularly well spent, but we don't want to just artificially hack away at our tax base, acting as if that's the right thing to do, because then we'll end up in real fiscal difficulty.
Question, Peter. Many of our Jewish agencies, and I know I've taken you on over the years on tours of them, whether it's JFGH, JCC, Jacada, you know, Jewish Foundation Group Homes, Charles E. Smith. A lot of our Jewish agencies, even though they're Jewishly inspired, are non-sectarian, as you said, and serve many people outside of the Jewish community. One of the things that when I have been advocating over the years for funding for these agencies is that we have found ourselves very successful in going to state government for capital dollars and going to local government to match some of those dollars, and for the county for operating dollars. But to try to get operating dollars out of state government is very, very difficult. And I think more and more that, you know, what I hear from agencies, Jessa and all the others, is that as our clientele expand due to the pandemic and due to other economic dislocation, what we need is the operating dollars to pay our staff, keep our lights on, hire a social worker. I mean, think about it this way. If you pay a social worker a package of up to $100,000, you can keep that social worker can see 25 clients. That's 25 women that they can prevent from help getting out of a situation of domestic abuse. And so one of the frustrating things that all nonprofit agencies find across the state is the state's lack of giving money for operating dollars, you know? So for example, Governor Hogan gave us $2.6 million over 3 years to help build the University of Maryland Hillel. And almost every Jewish agency that we have put up in the last few years has received anywhere between 30 and 50% of their funding from the state and between 10 to 20% of their building dollars from the county, but it's the operating dollars. So, and I know we have to be concerned about ongoing expenses because you can't promise something one year and do it the next year, but how do we expand the partnership with the nonprofit sector, which in my opinion does an incredibly better job than the public government in providing health and human services? And how do we provide more operating funds so that they could expand their reach and actually help the people that we're all together as a community trying to help lift up?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think the answer to it, I had this same issue for the 20 years I was on the Appropriations Committee in the legislature, and also in my 15 years as comptroller. My goal, I think, you're going to think that I'm loose with money. I'm not. I'm very tight with the dollar. That's why I think people appreciate somewhat my ability to do the right thing for the state. I'm very interested in setting up a $1 billion fund for faith-based institutions, community organizations, nonprofits, being able to get operating dollars as opposed to capital dollars. Why do I say that? Well, I mean, during COVID, it was just unbelievable what the not-for-profits rallied to do. And it wasn't just, Thanksgiving, I went over to churches and was handing out, turkeys and other food to the needy. And they do that on their own. It's something, anything that is being done that the state frankly has responsibility for, I think should be looked at. I don't mean to mention in a free spending way that I'm just going to take $1 billion and do something. I have to, you know, it has to be carefully constructed. But I think that's entirely appropriate, that not-for-profit groups that are doing what the government should do, which is taking care of people, not the big nonprofits, because the big nonprofits can kind of take care of themselves. I'm talking about the small nonprofits. And so I'm very interested in doing something that would, you know, go all the way down to the local level. When I talk to rank and file teachers, they say, gee, we always have to buy school supplies with our own money. We're out of pocket for things that should be paid for by the school system, but they don't have them. So we have to buy them and bring them into the classroom. Well, why not reimburse them? Very simply, they send me a receipt, we send them a check.
And when you described small nonprofits, I assume you're including nonprofits like the JCC, JESA, okay. Question.
But I'm also talking about faith-based institutions. I know we have constitutional protections, et cetera. I'm, you know, very aware of all that stuff. I happen to have a law degree, but I'm not constrained by it because, frankly, government is not capable, and state government, and often it's incompetent, and it can't do things that the nonprofits can. So I'm interested in a $1 billion fund that would have to be, you know, carefully looked at. You can't just, as you say, jump into operating ongoing costs. But I think it's doable, and I think it's important, and it can involve the very small. You know, a teacher sending in a $50 receipt for supplies that he or she had to buy, or a pastor at a small church sending in a receipt saying, you know, we bought 800 turkeys and gave them out for Thanksgiving, or healthcare, or a social worker. I'm not suggesting, once again, that the social worker be put on the state salary and we are obligated, but we can do things that facilitate the humanitarian contributions of our not-for-profit sector. I'm stunned at what we do for libraries. I mean, it's pitiful. Not the county. The county is very supportive, but the state is like, oh, we have a $35 million capital budget for all of Maryland's libraries. That's absurd.
As the husband of my wife was a public librarian, I endorse that position.
Yeah, but I just want to say that you know, there's also some debt. We have an enormous amount of unallocated debt capacity for the state, because we politicians, we always want to make sure that AAA bond ratings keep intact, so we artificially lower our debt. I'm knowledgeable about that. We can safely, not just on the operating side, but also on the capital side, do some significant improvements and reach out to the not-for-profit groups and basically say, you know what, we value you.
Mm-hmm.
We actually think what you're doing is super important, and we're going to change our funding.
Two questions combined. Right now, Maryland has 3 grant programs that are able to provide security for religiously affiliated institutions. One is under the Maryland School Safety Program, which is for $2 million, which allows like synagogues and church schools to provide for security. The other one is Protecting Against Hate Crime Program, which is for houses of worship. And there's another one for general nonprofit facilities improvement. All of these grant programs are one-time programs. But I can tell you, for example, my synagogue, which is Temple Beth Ami, spends over $50,000 a year in operating costs in order to hire police to protect my family and my children, and when we go to pray on Shabbat or throughout the weekend or on the holidays. Montgomery County, as an initiative of JCRC, created the first in the country nonprofit security program, and the credit goes to Andrew Friedson and Mark Elrich, who went ahead and pioneered this, that provides $700,000 in funding to be allowed to use to hire off-duty police officers. And we know that the 2 things that matter the most, and we know there needs to be capital funding because equipment breaks, it's got to be upgraded, it's got to be replaced. Fine, we need that constant source of money. But the 2 greatest things that, from what we know, is training for the staff that trains people what to do because let's face it, when we started these programs, we were all thinking about a 9/11 sort of catastrophic event, when the reality is most of the attacks have occurred between right wing male extremists between the ages of 35 and 55 who have been walking into synagogues and churches and shooting. So we know that the two things that have been saving the most lives, and this is what the rabbi in Texas said, is training and the presence of police officers as a deterrent. When the shooting occurred at the Los Angeles JCC in 1999, the person stopped at two synagogues to first do the shooting, but was dissuaded because there was a police officer there, but went on to the JCC because there wasn't a police officer there. Can we allow flexibility within the current grant programs that if organizations feel they already have enough cameras and everything to help alleviate the budgetary pressures in hiring police officers, possibly matching with local government? It's anywhere between $65 and $85 to hire an off-duty police officer per hour, and that could be the greatest investment in safety. So I'm asking your thoughts about,
the answer is yes, and I'm all about, all over the state, I say, we have no public safety. If we don't have public safety, you're not going to have an economy. Same thing with you guys. If you don't have safety, you're not going to have religious services that are, I hate to even mention this. It's like the rise of anti-Semitism and violence is just indescribably a nightmare for our country. And it has many, many things associated with it. But as far as in a reasonable way, providing in addition to capital expenses for surveillance, et cetera, providing religious institutions with the ability to protect their worshipers during services. And somehow, I think the issue would be helped a lot, because as governor, I am going to just state over and over again, I have zero tolerance for any kind of violence by one person against another person. And whatever we need to do, we're going to do it, period. I'm not talking about just your institutions. I'm talking about the entire state. And the situation in Baltimore City is very troubling because it's a great city. Maryland's going to be a great state again with Baltimore coming out of this epidemic of homicides and crime. But you have to have a governor who says, look, we have zero tolerance for misconduct by law enforcement. We understand that, but we also have to have zero tolerance for any kind of physical harm or hate crime against anybody in the state. And I will be stating that over and over again. I will always have your back. And I have enormous resources as governor, the elite law enforcement agency in the state of the state police. And U.S. Marshals are working in conjunction with the state police on crime issues. So I think all of this is doable, but I think we need strong, active leadership who are articulating all the time that we're going to be there, we're going to have your back, we're going to protect you. We are not going to allow anything that people fear right now. And so anyway.
So Peter, since
I don't mean to get off on my high horse.
No, let me ask you one quick question, Peter. Since we're now an hour and 15, even though we started 15 minutes late. There's two last questions that I want to ask you very quickly, because I think, and we can bang them out, then we'll close.
Hopefully they're yes or no questions.
Do you like me? Yes or no? I don't know. Okay. The first, thank you. That was a good one. The first question is your position on what else can we do about guns in Maryland? Boom. What are a couple things we can do to cut down on gun violence in Maryland? That's the first question. And then I'll
the problem with guns are guns. That's the problem. And
what? I'm sorry.
The problem with guns are guns.
Right.
The right says all the time, oh no, it's not there's no gun issue. It's just a crime issue. No, it isn't. The prevalence of particularly pistols have created an unbelievable problem for the country, because they're heavily involved in suicides, which are just tragic, and they're heavily involved in people hurting other people, and afterwards they say, "Gosh, if I'd known that, I wish I hadn't done that." But the issue is guns. And I happen to think that long guns that are not military, like a shotgun or something used recreationally, if someone wants to have a long gun like that for self-defense purposes at a home, I don't have a big problem with it. Pistols, I think, should be strictly regulated. I think they should be kept when they're not. People want them for recreational target shooting or something like that. I think they should be kept under lock and key at a gun club, something like that. But I'm not interested in people coming to me and saying, oh, the guns aren't the problem. No, the guns are the problem.
I've never met a gun that fired itself.
Those guns are even worse.
Yes.
So it's getting worse. I hope that the manufacturers of guns are held. We get rid of this liability protection they have. I think that would help. And I think we just need to have the right conversation about the fact that, the problem is, someone in distress puts a gun to their head and pulls the trigger. And I'll just conclude with this. I think they did a study on people that jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge out in San Francisco and took their lives in a moment of depression, basically suicide. And they found 6 people who had done this and somehow survived. I mean, it's almost inconceivable that you can think of it, but they found out of all these hundreds of thousands of people that committed suicide by jumping off the bridge, they found 6 that actually survived. And they asked each of them, what was your thought as you jumped off the bridge? Your first thing that came to your mind. And all 6 of them said, I've just made a big mistake. I made a big mistake. Well, you can't do that when you put a gun to your head and pull the trigger. You can't go back. And
that opens up a whole question about mental health resources that we don't have to get time. And last question.
I don't need to get off on this, but
no.
This is very frustrating to me because, I just feel bad for the violence.
As the field closes, we may do more forums with gubernatorial candidates who are emerging at the top. Final question: there's something called the Boost program in the state of Maryland, which is currently provides $10 million in subsidies to help people who are below the poverty range, to help them attend private schools. And in our community, and this is really for lower income families, and so this provides, last time I checked, it provided about 150 families in Montgomery County, mostly at yeshiva and Torah school, with subsidies to help their kids. And the JCRC is a strong proponent of these funds. It's $10 million in a budget of billions and billions that go to public schools. And of course, JCRC, we've been huge advocate of the public school system, but we also understand the drain that it puts on our families that choose to send their kids to traditional day schools. For example, the JDS, our flagship day school, none of the children are eligible for financial aid from that because of the way they provide scholarship. But there's also several hundred families in Baltimore, which has a much higher Orthodox community percentage-wise than we do, that rely on their funds. We've heard, and so I'd like to know what is your opinion about that program, about making more funds available?
Yeah, I think more funds should be available because here's the problem. I was on the phone on a virtual call with some of the teacher unions, et cetera. And they use the word you just used for your members who are drained of money when they send kids to these schools. Well, they said, are you in favor of draining the budget for the public K through 12 system with the Boost program? I said, yes, I am. And I strongly object to you saying that the Boost program is draining money from public education. It is a rounding error. $10 million. It's a tiny little bit of our education spending at the state level, which, as you said, is multiple billions and billions of dollars. So I find it offensive, frankly, that everybody is so exercised over this very small amount of money. And I would certainly explore not only continuing it, but making it more, because it is not a drain. It is a recognition that some people need help with alternative education facilities. And it just kind of gets under my skin a little bit when people say, we want everything. and we don't want those people over there to have anything. Well, I do. I'm a little more fair-minded, and this gets into the whole constitutional issue of helping, not just talking about your members, we're talking about Catholic schools and other things, but these schools provide, a huge, they're not to be ostracized and put over there on that side of the fence and never helped. They need to be paid attention to by the state of Maryland, and I will. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And I don't like people taking advantage of their political power to basically say, no, you need to give us all the money and no money for those guys over there. That I really find difficult. And so, the answer to what you're saying about the about the boost program is that I'm going to take a look at what can be done to improve and build on the success of that program. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much for giving us a really informative, diverse presentation. Thank you for spending extra time with us. One person texted to me, where do I get a Ukraine American pin that you have on your lapel?
Oh my God, I'm so happy to say that we will post that up on the info, because I got this pin and everybody asked me about it. It's got an American flag and a Ukrainian flag, and I just am so proud of the response of the state of Maryland on this issue, because I mentioned the pension fund. We divested everything. We're not going to have anything to do with Russia after this. They are persona non grata. And
I'm remembering that many years ago, you also helped us lead the fight to divest money from the Iranian oil sector.
Yes. Yes. And so, yeah, this little lapel, first of all, I'm at the end of my career rather than the beginning of it, but I never really knew that. I used to just like poke these buttons through the suit that I was wearing, but I never realized there was a lapel opening right there. So I'm very pleased to report that I'm not ruining my jackets these days. And I'm very proud of what is going on in Ukraine, because I think that they're showing the same resilience and bravery that was demonstrated by during the World War II. I mean, and I think they're dealing with a foe very similar to what emerged out of the pre-World War II era, and created these incomprehensible war crimes. I think the same thing is going on to a lesser extent in Ukraine, and I'm very proud to wear the lapel, and I'm very proud that I can stand with all of you and tell our country to do the right thing.
Peter, with those words, thank you very much for giving us a very diverse, wide discussion. I don't know of any elected official who's given out their cell phone. If you're elected governor, I would advise you to change it. Too late,
I already made the pledge. Here it is right here. I'm keeping it as governor.
I'm telling you, Peter, that may be one pledge you want to break. I'm telling you right now, if you become governor.
Everybody on the call, you don't have to have Ron call me.
Oh boy.
I already need to answer Ron's call. You guys can call me. So,
boy, was it. On that note, Peter, thank you for your long and warm relationship with the Jewish community and all you've done for public service. Thank you. Somebody just posted CW flags in Glen Burnie, and there's a number in the chat to order. Thank you. Best wishes, and we will continue our gubernatorial series, and we will make more opportunities for people to see the candidates. And thank you for the great participation. And Peter, thank you and your staff for making this possible. And Debbie, thank you for your excellent staffing on this call. Have a great day.